Hello and welcome to Walk the Cinema podcast. Today we're going to be covering Gaslight.
So you had seen this movie before.
No, I hadn't.
You're trying to gaslight me right now, which is a theme of the movie.
Right.
It's kind of why we have the
term
gaslight or being a gaslighter.
Yeah, which became very popular in the 2020s.
Yes.
But it was always
a word. It just hadn't gained popularity until more recent times. But even, I think this movie is credited as being the one to popularize it, even though this was a remake from a 1940 movie.
Right. But I think that MGM tried to gaslight us into thinking this wasn't a remake. I think that was their objective once this came out. They wanted to eliminate references to the British version. Mm-hmm. They kind of succeeded. Now we know, right? Now we know that there's an original version before this, which is, both of them are based on the play, but...
Yes, that was the point I was trying to make, was that it was all based on a play.
Right, but the production company really wanted to eliminate every copy they could of 1940s Gaslight. And they kind of succeeded at making this version, the 1944 version, the classic and the one we associate
gaslighting with.
And just the story in general, because it's a really good story.
Oh,
and
100%.
It really worked.
Yeah, I agree that this really did a good job. And it's obviously that this, I think, was a blueprint for a lot of more modern movies. One of the movies that I had immediately thought of as we were watching this was Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak, which it doesn't have the same plot line, but it's kind of similar, where this woman marries this man who she hasn't known very long, and he has some type of secret. I won't try to spoil Crimson Peak because that's not what we're trying to do and you haven't seen it yet, but it's essentially the same plot line in terms of that, and it's kind of like they're gaslighting her in Crimson Peak as well. But I
think that's what you get from this story. It's so simple in its narrative formula that you can grab it and modify it very easily and play around with it for your purposes of your story. Because this basically is a man manipulating a woman into thinking she's going insane so he can get away with his crimes.
100%.
That's very simple.
Yeah.
It's very straightforward.
And I really love Ingrid Bergman plays our main character, Paula. And I think she does a really good job at being a likable character. And you're also, you are grounded in reality. And I feel like it never makes it, this movie doesn't make it too complicated where it's trying to trick the viewer into thinking if she's crazy or not. We all know she's not crazy.
I think that's why the movie works so well. Because it doesn't try to play any tricks. It doesn't try to go crazy with it. It's very simple and grounded. Yeah. And we follow it all the way through. It doesn't try to play mind games with the viewer, which it could, and it would be fine too. Mm-hmm. But I think the simplicity of this, it's a straightforward plot. It's a really good performance from Bergman, which she won
Best Actress
at the Academy Awards. And, I mean, I don't know who she was up against, but she was definitely very good, so I would assume she deserved it. Or at least a nomination.
Yeah,
I agree. She was really good. And she really, slowly descended into madness. And you could... The whole movie's pretty slow.
Yeah.
He moves slowly. But that makes the pacing feel realistic.
Yeah.
Because you wouldn't just assume you're crazy after 1 or 2 days of being manipulated. So I think the slow, methodical manipulation really, really came across as believable.
Yeah, and then I think that with this, you kind of see her progression as a character as well, because, at the beginning, she finds out, or she knows that her aunt died, was strangled by somebody. It was a very big, public thing that happened.
Yeah, her aunt was a big opera star, I think.
And she's kind of reserved then, but then as she falls in love with her eventual husband, Gregory, as we know him at first, she gets out of her shell and you see how happy she is and she's kind of carefree and all this other stuff. And then as they're married and as he tries to make her seem like she's going crazy, that she's a kleptomaniac and all this other stuff, you see how withdrawn she becomes, even more so than when she found out that her aunt died. You know, like she becomes even worse off, you know?
And he's really good at manipulating. They don't make manipulators like that anymore. Where it does like the littlest things, but they're very obvious, not only to her, but also to like the viewer.
Yeah.
Where he shows the brooch, like very center of the screen, and it's like, here it is, I'm putting it down. And then it goes missing. And we know he did it, right? Maybe at the time, it was a little like...
more ambiguous.
Right, because the term isn't popular yet.
Yeah.
So it's a little more ambiguous, but I think it does...
It still holds up.
Yeah, and it leans on he's manipulating her.
Yeah, at least, like, we have him be a little bit sinister, and I think that, like, they did certain elements. Like, he's a really good actor, too. I think he did perfectly in this role.
Yeah, it's easy to hate him.
Yeah, he does it so well. He has this, like, deadpan, like, you're not sure if he's being cold on purpose, or if that's just his temperament, you know? So I think that it does a good job at that as well, where you think he really cares for her, but then he also has this kind of deadpan delivery.
But he doesn't care for her
No.
at the end of the day.
No.
He just
wants to use her to find her aunt's jewels. And so you have that plotline going on, but then you have the inspector, I think he works for Scotland Yard, who was a big fan of Paula's aunt. And so he's kind of, I mean, it's not like he's super obsessive with the case, but he is more obsessive than anybody else around him. Like, everybody else thinks it's a cold case, that it has to be closed. There's nothing to it.
I also like that they didn't focus too much on him.
Yeah.
She's the star in this, and I think following her 90% of the time is a lot more important than making this, like, an investigation that he needs to solve.
Yeah.
He's just there for, you know, the general conclusion and just to create an environment of distrust. But I think focusing mostly on her and having these side characters that kind of just see it as a third person, not involved in what's happening in her house. Like, especially the neighbor, the old lady that just sticks her nose up everything. She also really helps with, like, that's like her perspective from the outside, where she thinks, oh, she's a weirdo, she never comes out.
Yeah, and it's like, she doesn't know that she's being abused and manipulated.
It's a good perspective for us to see, because that means that the husband, his plan is working. Because everyone else that doesn't even see, like, the small things, right? Her losing stuff or whatever, they still think she's a weirdo because of how he manages her life.
Yeah. And it's like, it was so upsetting to watch at some points, because you, at least kind of knowing the plot line and obviously knowing what the term gaslight means, you kind of know that she isn't crazy, you know? And so as she devolves and as he is trying to convince her of things, like, it's so upsetting. And even, like, some of the things that he does that seem kind of mundane, like when she wants to put the coals on the fire herself, but he makes her call the servants and like wake them up or, you know, inconvenience them. And then he doesn't say anything. He's like, oh, your mistress called you. Right. And then expects her to be like the bad guy. It's kind of those types of things that just kind of whittle a person down, where it's like, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but you're making me do this.
Right, and he's building this whole environment in the house too, where she's the villain to the workers. Right. Like, instead of the workers disliking him, they dislike her.
Yeah. And we'll be on his side when claiming things that, like, she's forgetful and she's, they use a word that I can't think of. She's volatile, not volatile, but, you know, it's something along those lines.
But yeah, he builds this whole
persona.
Yeah, sure. But he also, like, I don't know, he clouds himself in a way that nothing comes back to him. Like, from outside of the house, the neighbors think she's crazy or she's weird. from inside of the house, the workers think that she's the bitch and she's the bad guy. Mm-hmm. And then she also thinks that she's losing her mind.
Yeah.
So he not only manipulates her, but he creates a whole environment to facilitate this manipulation.
Yeah, and I feel like this manipulation is some of the worst manipulation that can occur to a person, because it's like you can't even... He made her not be able to trust her own mind, like her own thoughts. Mm-hmm. You know? Like that's like a prison.
Even to the very end, after she found the letters and mm-hmm. I think she only found the letters, but she knew he was lying. She
knew he was lying because the inspector guy came in and he kind of laid out, like, this is what I think is happening, and then they end up finding the letter. Right. Like, even after she had seen that. Even after
she knew that, he kind of made her doubt that there was even an inspector that was there. Because she was so weak at that point.
Yeah.
And you can see that through her performance, where sometimes she just didn't have the strength
mm-hmm.
to, like, really fight back.
Yeah, because, like, she's so emotionally drained, mentally drained, even. It really would not be a good situation to be in.
And then it comes to that point where she finds the truth. And she's like, I knew it. And then he's like, did you? And she's like, oh, I'm not sure. For a split second, she even doubted that she found the truth.
Such a big hold on her. But then, you know, in the end, the inspector comes and confronts Gregory, or Sergius Bauer, as he is actually named. And so, you know, they have this amazing, I think it's an amazing scene, the end scene, where her husband is tied up and she has a moment alone with him. And he's trying to manipulate her into, like, helping him escape.
Mm-hmm.
Because he thinks he still has this massive hold on her. That he can convince her of the, like, everything that's just happened is a lie. Even though he admits, like, some half-truths. He's like, yes, my real name is Sergius Bauer, but he was a failure. He didn't have any compositions that were used or anything. So he's trying to give, like, some half-truths to try and convince her that he's still a good guy and still her husband. And then she does, like, this 180 on him where she's just like, oh, this knife? Oh, I don't know. Is this real? Oh, I lost it. I don't know where it is.
It's a really good for her moment.
It is. I love that moment.
It's very pleasing to watch her finally get hers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a perfect, and because you're so frustrated, the whole time, and then when she's getting her revenge, you're like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, I've read a lot of people, would even love this more if she just killed them.
I feel like the killing isn't in her nature, like in the character's nature, so I would disagree with that, but I do really love her revenge and her like monologue. It's just like such a relief to see her kind of let loose, because this is the kind you just had seen her for the majority of the end part where she's just exhausted, you know. Mm-hmm. She doesn't even have the strength to say more than a few words sometimes.
Yeah, Ingrid Bergman was really good, especially towards the end where she was playing this exhausted, she just couldn't get rest because everything she did, she had to question.
Yeah.
And she really portrayed that well without being over the top dramatic.
Yeah. And then so when we get to the end, she has, like, this life in her where she's just like, oh, I'm just a stupid little person that just can't do anything right. I'm so forgetful. Like, I don't even know where I put the knife. Or even if there was a knife. Wow, crazy. It's just really good to see that scene. And I love it. And then they kind of, like, I feel like they have to have, like, a somewhat happy romantic ending where the inspector shows interest in Paula. And so you're kind of like, oh, now they're going to end up together and he's not going to gaslight her. He's going to be a supportive,
right,
you know, kind of husband for her, you know?
And I think that's mostly why people that categorize this as a film noir are wrong.
Yeah, I don't think this is a film noir.
Because this has a good conclusion.
Yeah.
And, like, that's just not how a film noir would end in any way, so...
No, it's definitely more of a psychological thriller in my mind. And, you know, it was just good. I don't know what more else to say.
It was just so solid. And I understand why they managed to overcloud the original with this, like, big Hollywood production with big names.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen the original. A lot of people say it's even better or as good. And I have no doubt because you're working with a screenplay that's so good.
Yeah, it is. It's so simple and so, I don't know, it's still very fresh, you know? Like,
yeah, there's no real way to mess it up if you play it simple. I think doing it over the top and making you question if she's actually going through it, that would make it worse. Because it would overcomplicate it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think also we got really lucky that Ingrid Bergman took this role and made it great.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with a worse actress, this wouldn't be as good. Because I think she portrayed the emotions so well that it helped move the plot forward without having to explain more things.
Yeah. And then some, like, other things that I just liked about the movie. I thought it was fun to see Angela Lansbury be so young in a role. I had never seen her as anything other than, like, an old woman.
She's a little annoying, I'm gonna be real.
Yeah, but I think that's part of the character. You're supposed to not this
She's
woman.
A little... Yeah. She's young and...
Yeah, she's young, kind of ditzy. She's the maid, and she flirts with the master of the house, even though, you know, she knows he has a wife and, you know, all this other stuff. So I think, but it was just fun to see her, and I love her as Mrs. Potts. So you know, and then I can't think of her name, May Whiteley, the old woman that was the next door neighbor. Mm-hmm. She's in another movie that we covered, The Lady Vanishes, where she is the lady that vanishes.
She's better in that.
Obviously, but she doesn't really have that much of a role in this, but it was just good to see
She doesn't have that much of a role in The Lady Vanishes, to be fair.
But it was just good to see, like, a familiar face. I thought it was, like, nice. I don't know. I did like this movie. I probably will watch it again. I gave it an 8 out of 10. Honestly, I think it could go up upon another rewatch. You know, once you've seen all the things, like, maybe, you know, trying to see how he is manipulating her more so now that you know, like, the things that he does to manipulate her. So I think that I will revisit this at some point, and I just had a good time watching it. Even though it did make me frustrated throughout, I think that the ending payoff is so good that it's, like, worth the frustration that you feel the entire beginning part of the movie.
Yeah, it's a shame that this is leaving HBO Max, or has left HBO Max by the time this came out. Mm-hmm. There's no really great Blu-ray release. There's just, like, a standard Blu-ray release that we'll have to get, I guess, to watch, because it's not going to be streaming on anything we have. But I also gave it an 8. It's really good. It's so solid. And besides the performances and the story, the set design is also really good. The cinematography is really good. It's just super solid all the way through. And it's a classic story that's developed with time. And now we have more complicated versions of it. But this one is still great. And it's not exactly the blueprint, given that it is a remake of a movie that already existed and it's based off of a play. But there's a reason that this one is the classic, and more than just the studios trying to make it the classic by eliminating everything else that came before it. But it's also because the performances are so strong, and it's just so obviously good, and it was obviously good from the get-go. Got so many Oscar nominations.
Yeah, it got nominated for Best Picture, I believe. And I think Best Director, and then I think pretty much the main cast all got acting nominations. So the man that plays Gregory, which I can't remember his name, Ingrid Bergman got for Best Actress, and then I think Angela Lansbury got a nomination for Best Supporting Actress, which maybe, I don't know. I don't know, you know, the landscape of the other movies at the time, like if she really did that good of a job, but I did enjoy seeing her, and I think she did make the character feel slightly annoying and slightly like, I don't want you to be here.
Right.
Because, you know, that's kind of how Paula feels as the main character in the movie, you know?
This also reminds me that we didn't actually talk about the director, George Cukor, which he directed My Fair Lady and Philadelphia Story and the Judy Garland, The Star is Born. It also worked with Katharine Hepburn and other movies besides Philadelphia Story. So he had a big career, was an established director, and he made even more established movies after this.
Yeah. My Fair Lady's pretty iconic.
Yeah, and that was like 20 years after this one.
Yeah.
So, great director with an amazing body of work, like a very long and solid body of work. But this one kind of stands out to me. I don't know, it is different from his other work. At least his other more popular work.
Yeah, I mean, this one is more, I would say, darker.
Yeah.
There's like a murder in it and, you know.
Yeah, it's a lot darker.
Psychological terror, you know.
Yeah, it's a great film.
Yeah.
And we'll be covering this director again. I'm sure it's just because he has so many movies that we want to watch soon. So, subscribe if you want us to talk about any other of the director's movies or any other Ingrid Bergman movies, or just because you like us.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.